You know, it's funny, I think about my life, and it's like the Wizard of Oz. I'm from Missouri, southern Missouri, that boxcar, you make your way to Edwardsville, a small town in the southern part of the state, 6,000, 7,000 people. And then you find yourself at the University of Illinois, which is significant, probably the most significant thing that's happened in my life. And the next step is, here I stand set in Chicago, kind of like full circle. I'm in Chicago now receiving this award, which I appreciate very much. And I don't know how to tell you what it means, but this is probably the first time I've been honored in my home state for humanitarian work. And I like to say I've done a lot of things I'm very proud of, but for Anil, you and others at Illinois Humanities to do this, I truly appreciate it. And I say, I have this metaphor that I think about for life that I see, and that is, I'm looking down from 30,000 feet, and there's this person who's drowning. And as they're drowning, there are like hundreds of people doing things to try to help, but none of it's working. And that metaphor is kind of the way I feel about the state of humanities. And this distraction we have for all the stuff that's going on around it as we sink. It's almost like that Titanic when you think about how perfectly arranged the deck chairs were and the meals being served and how well-dressed the servants were and all this stuff. But the navigator effed up. So all the good work being done by innocent people didn't happen because that navigator didn't pay attention, lost sight of the controls. And I sometimes feel that way when I think about all the good work that's going on at the street level to render some help to this situation we're in the humanities. You know, if we don't get the navigators right, all of us as innocent folks will find ourselves in a bad situation. Now, that's the state of mankind as I visualize it. But I honestly believe that the human condition without aggressive intervention from all of us will not improve. I don't agree with Stephen Tinker, who thinks that we're the best shape we've ever been in as humankind. I don't agree with that. He's an author that writes these stories about how great the world is and how great it is for everybody. I think we're looking at the chairs on the Titanic and forgetting about how we're being navigated. I should tell you, the real question comes down to this. Do we believe that the risk of doing nothing is not a problem? We can handle it. Or do we want to believe the risk of intervention and make it an emergency is worth reward, not maybe for us, but for the next generation? And my whole life has been spent around the issue of what are we doing about the next generation? I will say that my hat's off to Scott Zeppelano, who's here. Where's Scott? The Hall of Fame, Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, has put the humanities work on their agenda as an operating issue because they represent the interests and the minds of hundreds of multimillionaire young people who can make a difference back in their communities around the world. And I celebrate and say thank you, and I'd like to give these people a round of applause for the work they're doing at the Hall of Fame. Thanks, Scott. I've been asked by, and I should also tell you I've had some experiences that I'll recount really quickly here, and that is, back in 1984, there's a gentleman named Phil Crosby, who got concerned on his own in the meetings like this about the state of our performance, our quality inside of our companies. The Japanese are moving very fast, overtaking all of us, and we were declared as producing junk in the U.S. And Phil started a campaign that essentially changed the direction of American corporation interests in improving the quality. He wrote a couple books, Quality is Free, What's Wrong with Quality, and that kind of stuff. But one person took on the notion of changing the direction of quality. I think that applies to one person or several of us taking on the notion of concern about our humanitarian efforts. The second thing that happened is there's a gentleman I worked with named Norm Sidley, and you read about it in my book on page 193, actually, because I was asked about it last night. We had an organization, I won't call their name, they were going out of business. And Norm sat with a bunch of us and began to design a program to reverse their direction. He came up with a phrase called win real worth. And I invite all of you to find a copy of the book, read 193, and see if you don't believe we're in the when, real worth phase of our existence right now, and what difference it'll make not only in reading that book and what you do, but in your own life. But that's the thing that's important to think about in changing the direction of things. When, real worth, take a look at that. I've been asked a lot about my life journey, and the most frequently asked question is the most impressive people I've worked with in my life. And three come to mind all the time. The first one, as some of you might imagine, is Nelson Mandela. This towering 6'4" South African activist was intelligent, and by the way, people don't say, with respect, our last speaker, don't say black folks are very intelligent very often. They say they're good, they're canny, they're sly, they do this well. They never say black folks are smart. Think about it. How seldom you hear that. Nelson Mandela, and by the way, Obama. Nelson Mandela was smart. And he had a way about him. He was calm, and he cared about leadership and took that very seriously. He never uttered a phony political platitude. He believed his destiny was simply to make life better. Not for South Africa, not for Africa, not for black folks, but for all of us, to make life better. He believed that and worked at it hard every day. In fact, the thing I remember most of him saying is his demeanor always was shocking because it was so authentic, the way he carried himself. But what he said stuck with me. I never want anyone to be treated in the way I've been treated. I never want anyone to be treated the way I've been treated. He was committed to that. By the way, the second person that comes to me is someone I met. I'm very proud of that meeting. And Colleen Olson is sitting here now. She remembers this time. We were called away in the middle of the night to go to Great Britain, to London, by Prince Charles. And we were in the middle of a basketball tour, college all-star tour. And Ryan, we were playing in what would now be, it's in Oakland, not Staples Center, but the Oakland Fieldhouse. And we had this game scheduled. We finished the last game, had to come back to Chicago for the next all-star event. We essentially had, Colleen, am I right, 48 hours we had to get this work done. And Prince Charles calls and he says, I want you to be in London. And Colleen says, you can't make it. And I say to Colleen, we can't make it. We hop on an airplane, we fly to London, and we get there, and they meet us at the airport. The next thing I know, we're standing in front of a room full of people like this. We were bankers, lawyers, in charge of all the universe of Great Britain, and Prince Charles presiding. I'm sitting on the corner over here, nearly sound asleep. And for the first time, I heard a leader, a world leader, talk about the price of inequality. And he admonished the bankers to get busy and look at their practices and policies and what impact they're having on not just on the strength of London, but on the world. And he said, I want you to write me and tell me how you've done in changing your behaviors for the next 6 months. I've never seen a leader since then, or at that, anyway, do that kind of thing. But I'm told the change was significant. The last leader I'll point to is someone we all know, or should know, and that's Jerry Colangelo. I've said every time I got on a podium, I've never met a person with that kind of leadership quality. And Jerry, some of you know, we got many people from the University of Illinois here. Jerry was my teammate at the University of Illinois. And I say repeatedly, and I'm embarrassing when I say it, when I got the Hall of Fame in TriMet this last year, I said it again, this gentleman could run this country in a way we've never seen before. He's that powerful a leader on the inside. Not a great speaker, not a lot of crazy words coming out of his mouth, probably not the brightest guy in the world you want to see, very smart, but his leadership skills are unbelievable. His ability to make change and make things work are unbelievable. That's Jerry Colangelo, University of Illinois graduate. Most of you know him in this room. He's probably the third greatest leader, a person I've been impressed with in my lifetime, traveling in 105 countries. I've met almost everybody. I still come back to Colangelo being my top three. And I think, Scott, you'd agree with that closely. Well, after 40 plus years in education and sports and business, I'm always asked by people in this room, what are you doing now, Mannie? What's going on with your life? And it's pretty simple. I think the world's humanities crisis is in need of leadership and help, much like Illinois Humanities do. And it can't be done just by social workers, and it can't be done on a part-time basis. I think we need to rally the greatest leaders we have to make a change. I think the navigators who are moving this big ship, I won't say this big ship, I'll say this planet, 225,000 miles through the universe, need to be re-looked at, because we'll get the deck chairs straight. That'll all be done really well. But if we're not careful, if leaders don't get involved, it won't happen. And again, it comes back to whether we believe the risk is worth the rewards we're going to take for it. Our legacy is very likely to be for the next generation that we either failed or we made our planet better. And our planet starts with Edwardsville, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, and this region, and of course the United States, and the rest of the world. Our leadership needs to improve and needs to set this as a priority. So what is Mannie doing? I'm trying to make that a priority. I have become a part of that organization because there's going to come a time when someone sits back and says, what do we do? And I want Dr. Dale Chapman and Lewis and Clark to be prepared to say, here's what we've got to do on a global basis to change this. Because I don't believe there's any scientists, any engineers, anybody else working on this subject of what do we do to make this thing better. And I'm hoping that through the work of Lewis and Clark, Dr. Chapman, where's Doc? Dale Chapman? His organization will be in place in a year or two to say, here's what we need to do. Here are the steps we need to take. No more meetings, no more planning and thinking. Here's what we need to do. That we need to have that in our portfolio. I'm going to fund that. I'm going to work with these folks, and I hope it comes to pass that in 4 or 5 years, we'll be the source of what we need to do immediately to get a sea change in where we're going. The navigation of this planet is not going real well right now. But I always close with the same thing. How does a guy from a boxcar end up being at this podium tonight? How does a guy raised in Edwardsville, Illinois, end up talking to Prince Charles, the Pope, Nelson Mandela, the leaders of China, Russia? How does that happen? It's a great world we live in. My friend Ed Hightower likes to say, life is good. And I'll tell you, life is great. This is a great world we live in. It's worth investing in, it's worth planning, it's worth getting it right. And I want to thank the Illinois Humanities for giving me an opportunity to vent my feelings tonight and think about the navigation of this planet, the navigation of where we're going, not about the beautiful buildings and chairs. Are we doing the right thing to keep this thing afloat another billions of years? I appreciate it. Thank you very much.